So, all right, we're live. Welcome to the pre-show for In the Boat with Ben and Rachel. Even the backstory of the name of this podcast has a little bit of today's topic in it. I'll have to bring that into it. Not like it's not like a story. It's just the fact of
how it came about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I got a compliment on my hair today.
Really?
Mm-hmm. I went into the Lookout to get some coffee, and somebody asked, like, did you get a haircut? And I said, well, yeah, like a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And they said something about like, and I immediately went into like, I don't like it. It's,
like, no, it's really good. I love it.
No, it wasn't like that. It didn't seem like pandering. It was it was like they had something specific. They were like, I just like the way it goes off to like, and I was like, oh, okay, cool.
Who was this?
It was one of the baristas there. So,
funny.
Or, and one of the customers who is somebody that I work out with at Camp Gladiator who happened to be there also.
Yeah.
So multiple people.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. So, and I didn't even put anything in it today.
Well, I mean, did you see it before you had a haircut? Maybe that's why they're like, it looks so much better. I'm just kidding.
You're so funny. Getting some skipping on our end, but hopefully it's smooth. We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're in the pre-show, which means we're just hanging out, kind of warming up, doing a little bit of prep before we go live.
Yeah.
In less than a minute is actually like the time that we have on the thing.
Oh, okay.
It's gonna be a more conversational show today. Probably more. I mean, it's more opinion based in the sense that we aren't going to be like sharing specific statistics and facts and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But we are sharing opinions that were not opinions. These are actually extrapolations of the data that's out there related to today's topic, if that makes any sense. So, yeah. You ready to dive in?
Yeah.
All right, let's get into the show. Nope, that's not. Okay. I did it wrong. I'm going to start over. Here we go. Hello and welcome to In the Boat with Ben and Rachel. I'm Ben.
And I'm Rachel.
And this podcast exists to address common creator struggles and provide weekly inspiration for your creator journey. Today's topic is a little bit different.
Yeah.
We're getting a little bit more, I don't know, controversial, but I feel like it's a really important topic. And the reason I thought to kind of shift to this one today is actually because of a newsletter that you just sent out recently. And I thought I wanted to kind of at the top let you talk about what that newsletter was about, and that would kind of set the tone for today's episode.
I'm not sure. I don't think it was a newsletter. It was a video that I recorded. Is that what you're talking about?
Maybe so. I thought you also wrote it into a newsletter or shared it as a.
I mean, I write a lot about it, so I don't even remember.
Yeah.
So you're referring to the question that I get often about how I get so much done as a mom.
Yes.
So, everywhere I go, I get some version of the question, how do you write so much when you have so many kids? And I just want to ask you, have you ever gotten that question anywhere you've gone?
No. So when I mention that I have 6 kids, the most common statement or sentiment is, oh, you're something along the lines of, oh, your wife must be a saint.
Yeah.
But I've never gotten a comment about my time. I've never gotten a comment that assumes that the fact of having 6 children affects my ability to do my job or my creative work.
Yeah.
And that's,
Yeah. So that's kind of what I wrote about, because the thing is, women are creators too, and women are ambitious too, and women want to have a career too. Not all women, obviously, but a lot of women, and having children does not change that. And so there is still kind of this assumption that when you have children, I specifically remember early in my journey as an author, there was a male author, and I won't say his name, but I remember him telling me after he found out I had 6 kids, he said, that having a kid costs a woman writer 1 book for every kid. And I was like, but why is it just women writers? Like, that doesn't make sense, So there's still this, like, in creative fields and everywhere, I feel like, but specifically because you and I are creators, there's still this assumption that women take on the bulk of homework.
Yeah. And so to the question of who is more creative, men or women, I did a quick search in Google asking that question, and it's interesting to me that there are even things that study this, but there were a lot of things that kind of point to masculinity as the more creative expression of humanity. But my sense is that a lot of that is rooted in.
There are studies that are asking what people think.
Right.
And
Sorry.
what people think is that men are more creative, and that has not been proven.
Right. Sorry. Yeah. I should back up and say it hasn't been proven. What people typically respond with is that their perception, based on kind of how we've
structured everything.
Structured our society, is that men are more creative. They're and you can kind of see that play out in a lot of different ways. I mean, there's kind of the classic, like, in a boardroom with an equal number of men and women, men tend to take up more of the speaking time, all the way to like really specific things. Like if you look at the audio for this podcast, I'm probably talking more than Rachel is. And it's not, that is related to creativity in some ways, but also, like, if you look at, just a moment, we have somebody knocking on the door. We have 6 children home today.
2 children home today. So get ready for summer. They're almost done. Why did they need to stay home? Now you just get me, I guess. So on this podcast, Rachel will talk more than Ben. I'm curious to see where he was going with that. I tend to talk less anyway. And I don't think it's because I'm a woman. I think it's because, in some situations, yes. But I'm also one of those people who thinks really hard before I speak. So sometimes my brain hasn't quite caught up. And so I just shut my mouth. I think maybe the world could use a few more of those. All right. Do you remember your thought?
Yeah.
Okay. I did say that since you were gone, this podcast would have more of Rachel talking than Ben, but I was just kidding. Go ahead.
And the only reason I am the one who went to attend to the child instead of Rachel is because I was closer to the door, and it would be because otherwise I'd be like,
Hey, can you go?
yeah,
Yeah.
they don't. No, I'm just kidding. Um, you can even look at history and the recording of the arts and celebrated artists in history, and find, especially in specific cultures, very predominantly male expression. Sorry, there's something over. I've got a punching bag over here that is hanging next to the studio, and it was making noise. And even though I started my ADHD medication, I just can't block it out. All right.
Woo.
So if you look at history and the artists who were celebrated in many different cultures, they're predominantly male. And you do, obviously, there are creative people represented and who have done amazing work, represented by both genders, but the ones that history tends to focus on and celebrate, and really the ones who were afforded the time and opportunity to work on their art were mostly men.
I was just going to interject in there that, when in the Bronte sisters' time, their first published poetry book was only published because they had male pen names. And that's what a lot of women had to do to get published.
Yeah.
Was to pretend they were a man.
Well, and it's interesting because, like we've come a long way, but then at the same time, you can kind of see, based on the art form, some art forms are now considered more feminine, and some art forms are considered more masculine. And so it's really interesting. But I think a lot of what the issue comes down to outside of that question is just how we've structured our society and how we've structured home life to reduce the amount of time women have to express and explore their creativity. And so that brings us back to what you were talking about in the beginning, which has to do not with an underlying belief necessarily, but more, not an underlying belief about creativity, but how an underlying belief about how the home should be structured and who should have what responsibilities affects a person's ability to express and explore their creativity.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a specific direction I wanted to take this. I was hoping to kind of like bounce it back to you there.
Well,
because it's a big problem, and I didn't want to just like jump right into like, let's talk about solutions and stuff, because I feel like it's really important. I guess this is a question that I would have. So we've in the beginning of our parenting journey, we weren't in a place ideologically where we thought about household responsibilities as an equal share kind of thing. And some of that is society, some of that is religion, so it's kind of a mix of different cultural elements that, and we were somewhat purposeful about, talking about the responsibilities and stuff, but I don't remember having a lot of conversations around like, there were some really like built-in understandings of, this is going to be, your responsibility and these are going to be my responsibilities. So I'm curious to know, like, from your recollection and the things that you wanted to create, your creative aspirations, how were those, what were those early parenting years like for you? What
Oh
was
my
your
gosh,
experience?
they were madness, basically, because I had a full time job, which I love to work. Like, I feel like work gives me life, and I also love my children, but they tended to like drain my life, and so it was a respite to go to work. But then I felt like I had to come home and manage everything. I didn't in those early years, I didn't do anything creatively. Like, I had my job as a managing editor, and so I wrote journalism stories and I edited things, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. And I just remember coming to a point where I was like, I am going to like have a meltdown or have a breakdown if I cannot create. And so I think that was the point. It was probably when we had our twins, so 4 and 5. So we had 5 kids when I was finally like, okay, something has to change here. So I think that's when we like started opening up the conversation of, and I will say that one of the things, growing up in the faith tradition that I did, um, it was always taught to me that a woman's place was to support her husband and to be the mother and have the home, take care of the home. But there was something inside me that never felt like that fit me, because I am an ambitious person and I love to work and I love to create. And so I felt like I didn't fit into that mold, which was also like, it was a very emotional thing for me, because I was like, was I just made wrong? Was I like, what is
Mm-hmm.
wrong with me? Why can't I just be okay with being a mom? And I think that took me into the journey of like deconstruction and all of that. Like, the things that I had learned were not true, you know? Um, and so
Yeah.
that was kind of I guess that was like the impetus for everything, where I was just like, no, I deserve to create and to do the thing that I feel like I was born to do, you know, because other, you got to do that. And why couldn't I, you know?
Well, and so like my experience being a creative person, um, early on when we were having kids, I I remember having this sense of, I if I need to spend time being creative to make something, um, then I am entitled to take
Mm,
that time.
yeah.
And that there was kind of this unspoken understanding that when I take that time as a father, I'm more or less off the clock. And I never I was never like, "Hey Rachel, look, I need my
Yeah.
time in my man cave to sit down and work on these songs." But I checked out.
Yeah. You just went
Um,
and did it.
and and a lot of that is because I didn't have anything challenging that behavior.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have any conversations or ideas that challenged that behavior until later on.
I mean, even when we were traveling around with our band, um,
Oh gosh, yeah.
like I had a full-time job and we would travel around, and I had to like pack everything for the kids. I had to make sure that they were okay. Like, basically it was, I would take care of the kids, we would go play on stage, I would get off, I would take care of the kids. So it was just like, it was constant, and it was madness. Like, I think back to that time and I have a pit in my stomach.
So when we played shows and brought the kids with us, we tried to arrange things ahead of time, like having people help out and watch the kids for us. And this, I'm going somewhere with
No,
this.
I was just going to say, I will say that you took charge on that part, which was very helpful because I don't like asking people for help.
At your pleading, I, d-
That's true. Yeah, but still.
I
Okay, go
don't
ahead.
give me credit that I don't deserve. Okay. And I'm not, like, I'm not, I don't want to rag. Like, this isn't a let's hate on men or let's hate on the, uh, on women who do find a lot of fulfillment
Oh yeah,
taking care of their, like,
absolutely. But
it's nothing like that.
no.
But like looking, it's, it's the unintentional. I think that's it. It's like when you don't actually wrestle with these ideas and have these conversations, you're going to, in almost every case, slip into the script that society has given you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's unfair that that script tends to, from a creative standpoint, from a creativity standpoint, tends to benefit men and tends to punish women.
Mm-hmm.
So, so I'm just pointing out, when I talk about these things, I'm pointing out my ignorance really more than anything. Like,
Yeah.
I wasn't purposefully like, I don't want her to be creative. you know?
Yeah, no, but when we're not having those conversations, we default. We
Yeah.
default to what we've been taught, and we default to the societal expectations that
Yeah.
exist. So
So we had people in place to help us with the kids, but I remember very few times that when something came up, as like when you're the help
yeah,
and you're not the parent, and there's something that comes up and you need to talk to a parent, it seems, in my memory, it seems like you were the go-to
oh, it was
person.
always me.
Yeah. So, and the reason that my memory is probably fuzzy on that is because I wasn't aware. Like, I was kind of I patted
Yeah.
myself from having to deal with that,
Yeah.
because I was like, well, I got the kids taken care of, and so we should be good now.
Yeah.
I mean, tell me, and I think that also kind of speaks to, like, they would go to you before they would think
Yeah.
to come to me.
Yeah.
Um,
Unless I was like in the bathroom or something. I was missing.
they might just wait. They're
I
like,
know, it's true.
they look, oh, okay,
She's
we
not
got to
there.
deal.
We're
So
gonna-
let me look
yeah.
over. I don't want to bother Ben.
Yeah.
So anyways, I think these are kind of our stories and experiences,
Mhm.
somewhat anecdotal, but so, and I can't remember what, I mean, you mentioned the twins. So I think there was definitely kind of like,
I think the twins was like the breaking point because it required both of us. Like one person cannot take care of twins.
yeah,
And we didn't have family helping or anything like that. And so it was like you and me. Hey, we've got twins and we've got like 3 other kids who are 4 years and under, or 5 years and younger.
yeah.
And it was madness. So
that was kind of like an became a point where we had to evaluate our roles, but I think there was also maybe a separate ideological shift
yeah,
away from what is generally taught as like the traditional structure of the home. And so I'm curious, when did you start seeing us kind of moving in that direction, where what's the word, egalitarian,
yeah.
toward a more egalitarian
I mean,
structure.
I think that was really, so I did a project where we kind of evaluated family values and
Mhm.
stuff. And I did a lot of reading, I did a lot of research, and I started understanding that it was not okay that I was treated like a second-class citizen in the places where, in our faith tradition, basically. And that was not the reason that I was born, and it was not like God's intention for me. And so, you know, reading all of these philosophers and just all of the research kind of culminated into a place where I was like, you know what, all of these things that I've been feeling for so long are valid. And it's not something that I should beat myself up about, but it's something that we should talk about. And I think that was kind of like the family values opened up lines of communication. Like you and I would talk about all of the things that we valued and what we wanted to teach our children. And I think one of the big things for me too was that all of our children are boys, and I didn't want them to go out into the world and just feel entitled to everything, you know? Like I want them to know the discrepancy that exists and the inequality that exists. And so embarking on that journey for me, it was like it starts in the home, you know? So I don't know, I felt like that was just really important. And so I can't remember if we had a conversation about it, but I do remember coming to you and saying, hey, if I don't get to write, I feel like I'm just going to like die.
Yeah. And I also can't remember a specific conversation, but
maybe you saw like the wild look in my eyes.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, my wife is about to go off the deep end.
Yeah. So we, at some point really intentionally started making space for your creativity, and that, you know, that wasn't a smooth process. Like I wasn't always an easy, you know, go along with
I remember
partner.
A few little fits. I'm just kidding. They weren't fits, but you know.
Well, so there were times when like I relinquished space that I had claimed for myself because I thought, oh, this is what I'm entitled to. Again, not like, not really purposefully, but just like, oh, this is so like giving you, this is actually, this should belong to you. And then there were other times when it's like, I need that. I need more than this.
Yeah.
And I, you know, like,
I remember those conversations.
Butted heads a little bit.
We did have, you know, the conversations that we had were not always, I mean, they were always civil. Like the way that we fight is we don't call names. We don't usually yell. Maybe I've called you an ass a time or two, but
definitely.
But, you know, like we did have conflicts about things.
So what is happening when those conflicts take place is, you know, I had 25 or more years of programming.
It was probably close to 30 because it wasn't until our twins were born. So,
and so when you're taught to believe that you're entitled to something that you're really not entitled to, giving that thing up feels like something's being taken away from you. And this is the common issue with the privilege conversation, with the conversation around white privilege. And sometimes it's not even like something is taken away from you. It's something is given to someone else that they deserve that doesn't affect you in any way. But psychologically as humans, we have a natural response to someone's success to feel threatened and a little bit afraid. Because, you know, there are potential implications to that person's success to our ability to be seen as, or have the access to the resources we need to be successful and survive. When someone fails, we actually get a spike of dopamine. It's like There's
Oh, that's
there's it's
wow.
terrible, but
Yeah.
it's kind of a part of human nature, and I think it's important to recognize that tendency. I'm not saying that like you actively sit there when someone fails and you think to yourself, haha, good.
Yeah.
But it's just a it's kind of the default response. And then of course, or the default reaction. And then of course there's the more thoughtful, like
Mm-hmm.
compassion based response that we have to people. And um you know, so it's definitely more complex than just like a binary reaction
Yeah.
to those two things. But all that to say, it's it's easy if you're not anticipating it to come to those moments where there's a negotiation about making creative space, and to feel threatened and to feel like you're losing something and to feel like something's being taken away. But I promise you, on the other side of that, when your person has the creative space they need and they're thriving, um,
Everybody
you get
wins.
so much, yeah, there's so much more joy,
Mm-hmm.
um, and goodness that comes from that than there is keeping all of that to yourself.
Yeah.
So,
Totally agree. And I often, one of the things that I tell people is my kids get a better version of me
mm-hmm.
when I get to create because it, it's what I love to do. And I know that there are people out there, men and women, who feel like they were born to take care of their kids, and I love that. Like, I love that for them, but that is not me. Like,
Yeah.
I do not. I love taking care of my kids, but I could never be a stay-at-home parent, because they drive me insane. So
when like early in our relationship, even before we had kids, people always um, said that we were both very creative people.
mm-hmm.
Um, and even like when we had kids and they talk about the kids, they kind of talk about it in the context of, oh, they've got such creative parents. And what I think was unspoken in those statements was they have a creative dad and they have a creative with an asterisk mom. and I think the work is really getting rid of that asterisk. It's like what, and in a partnership, where there are two creative people, how do you make sure that there's space for each one of you to be creative? And so that's really been the work that we've embarked on over the past several years.
Yeah, I mean, it's been 10, 11 years that we've worked on that really hard.
Well, and it's conversations, it's negotiations,
mm-hmm.
it's constantly re-examining things, it's checking in with each other, and on my part, it's been proactively trying to figure out where, and it's, the thing about this is there's some obvious, it's like the amount of time that you spend watching the kids and like how you divide your schedule, but then there's some not so obvious things, like the things that you were responsible for thinking about. And
it's called a mental load.
Yeah, so
women tend to take on more of a mental load when it comes to family.
But the more you have those conversations, the more you can see those things.
Well, I will say, like, the mental load is, like, that's tough to balance with creativity because it's all in the mind,
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important to not just have the physical equality, but also the mental equality.
Yeah, it's like we've got our calendars worked out. We both
mm-hmm.
have exactly the same amount of time, but you still have to schedule all the doctor appointments, and you still have to make sure that we have all the meals planned, and you still have to do the grocery shopping and the laundry and the
or make sure the kids are doing their laundry.
Make sure, yeah.
They all do their own laundry, and hypothetically.
And there's also, this is something I'm learning right now. Like, there's a difference between the intention of wanting to step up and help out with those things, and saying you don't have to worry about that as much because I'm going to help you out with it. But I've found that Rachel doesn't really believe me. She doesn't believe that until I've actually done it
Yeah.
a handful of times at least, and shown that I can be consistent with it. Which hopefully is going to be getting easier now that I'm on medication. I've mentioned that a couple of times. I was formally diagnosed, I think since the last time we
Yeah.
did this, I was formally diagnosed with ADHD and have started taking medicine for it. Yeah. So, and that was kind of at the direction of my therapist and my doctor
And your
This is-
wife.
and my wife. Yeah. So we'll have to report back on that.
Yeah.
I wanted to address and we should tie
Wrap it
things up pretty soon.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I wanted to address the faith part of this because I think what's challenging, it's kind of a spectrum. Like, there are different degrees. You may go to a church, or have a faith community that's very, like the home structure is very patriarchal. Or you may go to a faith tradition that doesn't emphasize that very much and doesn't really talk about it, talks a lot more about other things. But those ideas are still there, and they have influenced secular culture.
Mm-hmm.
So to the point where you could even grow up, never attend church, and still be
Believe
instilled with
Yeah.
those ideas.
Yeah.
So I think what's challenging, though, about that being a part of your faith tradition is there's a fear that questioning that interpretation,
Makes everything fall down.
questioning that aspect of your theology, makes everything
Blows
else
everything
fall
up.
apart.
Yeah.
And so I want to challenge that idea, because I think if you have a strong faith, and most people would say that they have strong beliefs and feelings and experiences, it's okay. It can handle you bringing questions like, is that interpretation something that's prescriptive that we should be basing our entire culture and society around? Or is that just a description of how people functioned at the time? And as an example of that, the family structure described in later writings is different from the family structure described in earlier writings. It evolved, it changed. Could it be possible that things can look different today without betraying the principles of your faith? And so I think it's worth asking those questions as a starting point for having these conversations. And, if like you were saying earlier, if you're someone who is really happy, genuinely happy with the way that your home is structured, and you have a lot of fulfillment, but I think you gotta check in with each other, because like the man in the partnership might say, yeah, things are great,
Yeah.
but you have to leave room for the other person to be able to say, you know what, I haven't wanted to say anything. I felt guilty about saying something, but I'm not fulfilled. I'm not happy. I don't have enough time to do the things that I feel like are inside of me to do.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, making space for that. And I do want to say too that you and I are approaching this from a cisgender heterosexual point of view.
Of
so
course,
we're not
yeah.
speaking for everybody, and those voices need to be heard as well. And I hope that we can, you know, have more conversations around different aspects
yeah.
of
So
this topic.
the dynamic we're describing is predominantly a cisgender hetero partnership
Yeah.
kind of dynamic. But yeah, I agree with that.
So I just didn't want, you know, to feel
Well,
like
we're not,
or to
yeah.
propose that we were speaking for, you know, every partnership that's out there, because
Yeah.
we're in our partnership, and you know, it's male female, and
Right.
we're speaking for male female partnerships.
Yeah. Or to imply through the discussion of based on a hetero relationship that that's the only valid
Yeah, no.
form of relationship. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. I enjoy this
Yeah,
topic.
yeah.
And
Oh, I'll always talk about feminism. So
yeah, I hope it's been helpful. I just, gosh, it just kills me to think about those early years, and I don't feel guilty. I feel sad, you know, like it feels like a loss that we didn't have these conversations earlier.
yeah.
And I don't want that for other people.
Well, I made up for lost time. So
Yeah, you did. What did you write? 2 million words one year?
yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
it was like the first year we did it. So
All right. Well, we are going to go ahead and sign out. No after show today.
all
But
right.
thank you so much for listening. If you want to find us online, you can go to intheboatpodcast.com. I'm at bentolson.com and Ben Tolson on all the things. Rachel, where can they find you?
RachelTolson.com, and I'm at Rachel Tolson on all the things.
All right. Thanks again.